I'm 79 years old, and I need to tell you something that no mother wants to admit. If your children don't come around, don't beg them. Don't call them crying. Don't make yourself pathetic. Because after 35 years of being the perfect grandmother, the one who never said no, the one who dropped everything and ran whenever they needed her, the one who existed only to make their lives more convenient, I learned a truth that broke my heart. When you beg for love, you destroy the last shred of your dignity. I raised 3 children almost entirely on my own. I gave everything. And one day I woke up and understood that I had become the obligation they were trying to avoid. Until I did something that terrified me. I stopped calling them. And what happened after that taught me the hardest lesson of my life. If you have ever felt invisible inside your own family, if you have ever counted the minutes your children spend with you, if you have ever kept food in the refrigerator for days, waiting for someone who never came, stay with me. Subscribe, because I'm going to tell you how I found my peace. And leave me a comment if this story sounds familiar, because maybe you need to hear that it's okay to stop waiting too. My name is Rosaria Esposito. I'm 79 years old, and I spent at least 40 of them believing I was the perfect mother. You know what that means? It means I never said no, never complained, never asked for anything in return. It means I turned myself into a shadow that existed only to make my children's lives easier. But let me tell you about the day I thought I had won the lottery of motherhood. It was June of 2009. My son Samuel was graduating from medical school. Medical school. You understand what I'm saying. Me, who had cleaned other people's houses for 20 years. Me, who never finished high school. I had a son who was a doctor. I was sitting in that auditorium at the University of Cincinnati in my good dress, the one I had bought specially at the thrift store on Reading Road. Alone, no one beside me, and I did not care one bit, because I thought, I did it. I raised 3 children without their father. I brought them up with my own 2 hands. Look what they became. The room smelled of polished wood and fresh flowers. Families around me were taking pictures, embracing, crying with joy. I was alone, but it didn't matter. When Samuel walked across that stage, with that slightly awkward walk he'd had since he was a little boy, I felt like the most powerful woman in the world. I had raised my children to be independent. I had succeeded. Oh, how wrong I was. Sunday dinners were my sacred thing. For years I set the table for 10 people, even when I knew that maybe 3 would come, maybe 4 if it was a good day. I started cooking Saturday evening, the pot roast simmering all night on the lowest flame, the way my mother had shown me. The baked ziti, because that was what Maria liked. The stuffed peppers, because Samuel went crazy for them. The biscuits, because Anthony always wanted them. The kitchen filled up with steam and smell. I'd wipe down the same section of the counter 12 times while looking out the window at the street, watching for a car I recognized. The roast would be done by 2 in the afternoon, but I'd keep waiting. Maybe they stopped for gas, I'd tell myself. Maybe they're almost here. I put the food in separate containers, one for each child, for when they came by. Most of the time those containers sat there until I threw them out. But when they did come, when they actually came, it felt like it was all worth it. Like that September afternoon when Maria brought her oldest daughter to learn to make biscuits from scratch. The 3 of us in the kitchen, 3 generations of women from my family with flour on our hands, laughing because the dough never rolled out thin enough. Maria was wearing that perfume she'd used since she started working at the bank. Something expensive that mixed with the butter and the flour. The late afternoon light came through the window over the sink and made everything golden. My granddaughter was 7 years old. She called me Grandma Rosie and asked me to tell her what her mother was like as a little girl. This is how it works, I thought, watching them work the dough together. You teach, they grow, but they always come back to learn more. I am their safe harbor. It was perfect. It was how things were supposed to be. Or at least it was how I needed it to be, because the truth is that even then, the visits were getting shorter, the phone calls more hurried, and I didn't want to see it. The first sign was so small, I almost missed it. Anthony called me every Thursday, religiously, for years. We talked about his work, the grandchildren, how the weather was. Normal conversations between a mother and her son. Until one Thursday he said, "Mom, I can't talk right now." And he hung up before I could tell him about the results of my cardiology appointment. The dial tone buzzed in my ear like an angry hornet. I stood there with the phone in my hand for a full 5 minutes, listening to nothing. Did I say something wrong? I wondered. Did I talk too much? Maybe he was genuinely busy. Tomorrow he'll call back and ask about the appointment. He didn't call back, and without quite noticing it, I started keeping time. 2 hours at Christmas, an hour for my birthday, 45 minutes when a new grandchild was born, and they came to tell me. The hugs got faster. The I love yous, Mom started to sound like apologies. I began preparing conversations in my head before they arrived. Should I ask about work? About the kids? Or was that being too nosy? I lied to myself every day. They're busy with their own families, I told myself while I wrapped Christmas presents. It's normal. It means I raised them right, making them independent. In December of 2021, I had bought gifts for all 3 children and all 6 grandchildren. I had wrapped them in their favorite colors with hand-tied bows, the way I always did. I had put them under the tree the 1st of December. The living room looked like a toy store display. The tree lights blinked on and off over the packages while I drank my coffee from a mug that said, "World's Best Mom," a gift from Maria when she was 11 years old. That Christmas, nobody came. Family obligations, they said. Definitely next year. But I kept not understanding. I kept thinking it was my fault, that if I tried harder, gave more, needed less. It was when Samuel had that stupid fender bender that I lost my head. I heard a siren near his neighborhood and called him 3 times in an hour. I left messages that got more and more frantic until he texted me, "Mom, please, enough." My hands were shaking as I dialed again. The kitchen clock was ticking while I waited for him to answer. I'm turning into the mother I swore I'd never be, I thought. The clingy one, the suffocating one. But what if something happens to him and I'm not there? The truth was that they didn't need me anymore. The truth was that I had turned myself into a burden they were trying to avoid as kindly as they could. The truth arrived like a punch to the stomach on the day of my 78th birthday. I had baked a cake. A real one, layers, frosting, the works, the way I'd made birthday cakes my whole life. I had bought those little paper party hats. I had gotten the camera ready. Anthony arrived 40 minutes late with a bunch of flowers from the gas station that still had the price sticker on the cellophane. The cake had sunk a little in the July heat while I stood there pretending not to see the price tag on the flowers. The paper party hats were lined up on the table like little soldiers waiting for orders that weren't coming. This is pity, I thought, as he hugged me for exactly 3 seconds. This isn't love. It's obligation. He's here because he feels guilty, not because he wants to be. But the final blow came 2 weeks later. I found out through Facebook that Maria's daughter had won a school award. I saw the photos of the celebration I hadn't been invited to. The whole family gathered together. The chair where I would have sat left empty. The computer screen lit up the dark living room. I could hear my neighbor's television through the wall. One of those game shows with the canned laughter that made me want to scream. 36 years, I said to the screen. 36 years teaching them to read, doing homework with them, going to every school play. and now they can't even let me know when their own children have something to celebrate. I had become a stranger in my own family. And the worst part is that I knew it. I had known for months, maybe years. But it was easier to keep pretending that everything was fine than to say out loud the truth that would have destroyed me if I'd spoken it. Christmas Eve last year, I finally understood everything. I was sitting at my kitchen table, looking at a meal I had cooked for 10 people, watching my own reflection in the dark window. 8 empty chairs around me like silent judges. Nobody was coming. The house smelled of cinnamon and disappointment. The phone on the wall looked like a verdict being read. For the first time in my life, I said the truth out loud. I raised them to fly, and now I'm surprised they flew away. It wasn't that they didn't love me. It was that I had turned myself into the obligation they were avoiding. You know when you understand that your child sees you as a burden. When he shows up at your birthday with gas station flowers and stays exactly long enough not to feel too guilty. When you run into his car at the grocery store and he pretends not to see you. When your granddaughter says, "Grandma, Dad says we can't stay long," before she's even taken her coat off. That Christmas Eve, I stayed awake until 4 in the morning, looking at that food, counting the napkins I had folded so carefully. 22 red napkins for a dinner that never happened. And then I understood something that broke me open. I had done this. I had been the one to teach them that Mom would always be there, that Mom would never complain, that Mom would never have needs of her own, that Mom existed only to make their lives easier. I had taught them to take me for granted, and they had learned the lesson perfectly. On January 3rd at 6 in the morning, I got up in my nightgown and yanked the phone off the wall. I pulled it with both hands. The plastic made a small, dry snap. The silence afterward felt different, not empty, clean, like the moment when you stop holding your breath. I will never beg for love on my knees again, I said to the empty kitchen. I will never make myself smaller and smaller to fit into the leftover corners of their busy lives. And for the first time in 40 years, I felt free. You know how strange it is to realize that you have lived for other people for so long that you don't know who you are anymore. For weeks afterward, I would wake up and the first thought wasn't, who do I need to call today, but what do I want to do today? It was terrifying. It was also wonderful. I stopped buying food for 10. I stopped cleaning the house as if company were coming. I stopped checking the phone every 5 minutes. And something strange happened. The house didn't feel empty anymore. It felt mine. The neighbors started to notice. My downstairs neighbor Betty said to me one afternoon, "Rosaria, something's different about you. You seem lighter." I didn't know how to explain to her that I had stopped waiting, that I had stopped living in the conditional future. When the children come, if Samuel calls, maybe for the next birthday, I began living in the present tense. This morning I'm going to the market. This afternoon I'm reading. Tonight I'm cooking only for myself. It wasn't that I had stopped loving them. It was that I had started loving myself. And that, I discovered, was something I had forgotten how to do. But there was one last lesson the silence had to teach me. 6 months later, I was watering the basil plants on the back porch when I realized something extraordinary. I wasn't thinking about who was going to eat it. I was tending it just for the pleasure of watching it grow. The soil was cool under my fingernails. A robin landed on the railing and sang one clear note. The September sun was warm on my shoulders in a way that felt like approval. I exist beyond what they need from me, I thought, straightening the pots. I was a whole person before I became their mother, and I am still whole now. When was the last time I had done something only because it made me happy? Not because it would make someone else happy, not because someone had asked, just because I wanted it. I couldn't remember. But that day, tending the basil for no one but myself, I remembered. This morning, like every morning since January, I looked at that phone I put back on the wall, because in the end I need it for emergencies. But I look at it differently now, not with hope that it will ring. I look at it the way you look at an old friend who taught you something important. The morning light hits it in a way that makes it look almost transparent. The coffee tastes better when I'm not waiting for it to be interrupted. The house doesn't feel empty, it feels mine. Love isn't measured in phone calls or visits. I love them enough to let them go. Now I love myself enough to let them stay away. The other night, for the first time in years, I didn't dream about them. I dreamed about myself at 30, before Anthony was born. I was standing on a beach in North Carolina I've never been to, wearing a blue dress I've never owned, laughing at something I couldn't remember when I woke up. But I remembered the feeling, freedom. Not the freedom of having no responsibilities. The freedom of remembering that I have the right to exist without justifying myself. That I have the right to be at peace without feeling guilty. That I have the right to not be the perfect mother, because the perfect mother is invisible, and I am too old to keep being invisible. This afternoon I'm going to call Betty downstairs and ask if she wants to come up for coffee. Not because I'm lonely, not because I need the company, but because I like how she laughs, and because I made biscuits this morning and they came out well. And if one of my children gets in touch, they will be welcome. But I'm not waiting for them anymore, because I learned something that took me 79 years to understand. Real love doesn't need an audience. Real love doesn't keep score. And real love, the truest kind, starts at home. Finally, after a whole life, I am home with myself, and it's enough. It's more than enough. It is everything I ever needed.